Hi, everyone. I'm Denise Garth, Chief Strategy Officer at Majesco, and you're listening to the Future of Insurance Industry Leaders podcast series. Follow along as I interview the best and brightest leaders in the insurance industry and insurtech landscape to bring you the latest in digital transformation, innovation, industry trends, challenges, and opportunities, as well as next-gen technologies. We use our experience to anticipate what's next without losing sight of what's now. Stay tuned to find out your next now. Welcome, everybody, to today's podcast for Future of Insurance. I am thrilled to have Jennifer Linton, the CEO and founder of Fenris Digital, joining me today. I have known Jennifer since she first started. I met her at the Global Insurance Symposium when she was one of the first insurtech startups that actually came through as one of the startups there. So Jennifer, welcome, and I'm so excited to have you.
Oh, thanks, Denise. I'm so delighted to be here.
One of the things that I like to do is, this is a small industry. Everybody thinks that they know everybody, but I find that not everybody knows everybody. So why don't you give a little bit about your background, why you started Fenris, and talk about our growing partnership.
I come from a non-traditional insurance background. Doesn't everybody love to say that, right? An outsider from the inside. But it's true. I actually studied molecular biology. And then I embarked on a career testing medical devices. I wanted to change it up, and I went back and earned my MBA, and then jumped into corporate development and strategy for large publicly traded companies. And it was about that time that things shifted in 2009, right? The whole industry went upside down. The whole world went upside down. A friend of mine called me up, and he had a pretty traditional insurance pathway. And he said, "We're going to start a carrier from scratch. I'd like you to join the team, and I think it'll be fun." And I did it. I jumped right in. And that was how I got started on my insurance journey 15 years ago, helping to launch Elephant Insurance, which is a direct-to-consumer auto carrier. Yep. And then I just became kind of very good at looking at that problem and figuring out how to solve it. And I was so fortunate because I was surrounded by so many insurance experts who graciously shared their knowledge with me. So my next startup was a telematics platform. And we launched that and became VC backed and had telematics programs running for carriers on 3 continents. Sold that to CCC. That then gave me a chance to kind of pop back into corporate life. And I went to work for Allianz as their VP of new markets, scoping out the US to find organic or acquisition opportunities for growth. And I think about that time is when I realized that I love insurance, but I also love the startup world. You can move at a faster pace. You have to abide by all the regulations, but you don't have to move at the slow pace that a lot of big companies do because they have a fear of breaking things. And so that's when I said, I'm going to go ahead and solve some of those initial problems I saw when I was helping to launch Elephant Insurance. And I went back to the roots, and that's what was the genesis for Fenris. We really are striving to bring the single source of data and insight in real time, inject it into workflows, and create that predictive AI layer, augmenting what a lot of companies are trying to do, right, with their own analytics.
Yeah, you guys are actually one of our inaugural partners in our new AI ecosystem as well. So I think that's going to be really exciting too, to kind of leverage what it is that we're doing with GenAI to be able to kind of share the data back and forth.
I'm so excited about that. Yeah, you guys were terrific. Majesco selected those 5 inaugural partners. We're delighted to be included. Fenris is right there alongside of Charlie and CyberCube, Gradient AI, and CoreLogic, right? That rounds us out as the first 5. Yeah. And there's just such a wealth of untapped data. And Majesco's been so brilliant about thinking, how can we leverage, in a permissible way, some of this anonymized data, bringing it to bear. And this is what really we get excited about, because it really jazzes us when we get a chance to use some of our machine learning platform to enhance and make the insurance processes better.
So you were one of the first insurtech startups with a woman CEO back at the start of insurtech. You were recently recognized as 12 women driving momentum. And as I said in the introduction, I remember meeting you at GIS and talking about your plans and a potential partnership, which now we're kind of coming to that fruition. Fast forward 8 to 9 years later, talk about how insurtech has changed, how it has matured, and what observations and learnings you can share to other startups, but in particular to women who are leading a new startup.
Yeah, that's a true statement. There are lots of changes that have occurred.
Yeah.
Hasn't stood still, has it, over the past 10 years? And the pace of change has picked up as well. But yeah, I think when I initiated Fenris, I was probably one of the few female CEOs. I've since been so fortunate to see so many other wonderful women stepping out, stepping up to take on the responsibility, both in the role, but also the title. So that's been really exciting to see. And I could name several of us, have this back channel relationship vice for each other. Yeah, the industry certainly has undergone a lot of change. And what's been really exciting for me to see is, yes, we've seen a ton of change. We've even ourselves made a lot of pivots, but we sort of started out thinking we'll be the Levi Strauss to the insurtech industry. And one of the key things is to have really good data and really good actionable data, right? And recommendations in real time. So those are kind of the picks and shovels. So along the way, we've served dozens of insurtech startups. Some of them are still around. Some of them are really thriving, and lots of carriers and MGAs and brokers and marketplaces as well. So we got to see kind of across the board the rise of the MGA. That's the latest thing, right? Is really everybody wants to focus in and be very specific. I think they're just really chopping down that cost of acquisition, which is very imperative, while still applying all of the great early risk assessments, right? And pricing innovations and even claims innovations. One of the fun ones that I've seen was, of course, the initial, we're going to replace the agent. And then the next step is we're going to embrace the agent, the independent agent. And now we're finally on volume 3 of this book, which is AI is going to assist the agent, right? And enable them in a different way. Even some of those early conversations that we had when I was just coming up with the concept, those were so formative, right? The visionaries of the industry coming together often to talk about what we want to see happen, and then over time shaping it and making it occur that way. And I've just been really fortunate to have this front row seat to it and to be a big part, I think, of the journey and the success of some of our clients as they continue to embed some of the predictions or the data to become better and better about risk selection, growth, profitably, and enablement.
Yeah, but one of the things you said, Jennifer, is the pivoting. You know when to pivot and how to adapt and pivot. And I think that's a really important aspect throughout the rise of insurtech, because there's been a lot of pivoting, but some people didn't pivot. Some people didn't adapt. And that, I think, has been a crucial kind of success factor for you. Would you agree?
I think someone very wise early in my career told me that strategy is 85, whatever percent you want to put on it. Some high percentage of success is when you have a strategy of what you say no to. So you have to be very clear. It's not just what you're going after, but what you will avoid being distracted by. For us early on, initially, we did a lot of the custom build out of embedding our models and then building a UI that would enable those workflows for our customers, right? Dashboards. And a lot of other startups have gone that route and have done very well with software. But for Fenris, it was in 2020, we said no to that. We actually let clients go and found them other software shops for those custom builds. We just honed in and said, we're going to focus on this problem of understanding the entity, that applicant, whoever's behind the applicant or the submission. And we're going to understand that with a wide variety of data and then put predictions and prescriptive actions against that, bolstered by all the outcomes so we can optimize. And as we started to focus in on just building that out, I'll give you a fun stat. The first 2 years after we went live in 2020, it took us about that long to get to the same volume of API transactions that we do today every 20 days. So you see the progression of things, right? As you hone in and get it right, that's when the snowball effect starts to take hold.
Really exponential.
It has the potential. Absolutely, right? Because of the way that it is so scalable and so repeatable.
One of the challenges, you started to talk about this for the insurance industry, is access to the right data. Talk about the challenges, productized data, and how you're approaching data differently.
Productized data, I think, is a great way to phrase it. It's like anything, a product, the old way of selling data as a product tended to be these large data licenses, right? Where they would drop you a batch file, maybe every 3 months.
Yeah. And
then your internal team would ingest that, host it, and try to make sense of it. Create all of your use cases around it, right? And oftentimes it was siloed or separate, or let's say you even had data within your own systems and you had a hard time putting that together, right? So for us, the productization of data, it means it's readily available. It's fully cleansed, normalized, labeled, and you can inject it into a workflow exactly the way that it's needed. But there's a really big challenge there, and that is that data, it is incredibly complicated. Just even entity resolution can become a massive challenge. We've seen this often with clients. Sometimes we'll be looking at a book and maybe 25 to 30% of a commercial book roll, those entities aren't the actual entity's name, right? There's some derivation like a DBA, or the owner's name is entered as the policy, the name of the entity. So there's just all of these really rich opportunities. Even in personal lines, where we do the bulk of our business, it is very challenging to resolve down to an individual. And so when you can get good at that, that's the backbone, is the identity piece, right? To productize the data. You're able to, on the fly, cultivate and create those data packages that you need to inject either into your own models or into another workflow. The productization for us, it's just a real key, because you have to be very, very good at getting the entity match correct in real time, bringing alternate data sources together and bridging across that, and then actually have a platform that can deliver that in a second.
So one of the other things that you and I talked about, and this is where I think somewhat of our partnership is going to come into play, what role does contributory databases fit into the equation for access to quality data? Because when you think about, in particular, some of the smaller insurers, they don't have a lot of data sometimes to be able to really effectively leverage the models out there. You really need a good set of quality data to really train and optimize those models. So how do contributory databases kind of contribute here?
We first have to say that there are good contributory databases and there are bad contributory databases. I feel strongly about this because there are certain contributory databases out there where companies contributed, and then those data companies that held the contributory data would monetize it by selling it back. And in ways they put limitations on innovation. And so we're not going to talk about those so much now that we've kind of drawn a line and said, hey, we know those exist. They do serve a purpose, but they can be very limiting in terms of the bias of what's contributed, the breadth of coverage, and just how fresh it is. In a good contributory database, such as you are building at Majesco, you're exactly right. When there are industry players that don't have the full picture of what's happening out in the marketplace, they can't create benchmarks. They can't get better. If you're only benchmarking yourself, you're really living in a silo. And so for them, it's incredibly important to both have access to sort of the wider picture of what's happening, as well as we feel it's super important because Fenris brings the unique aspect of its own data set, right, on every applicant, every policyholder in the US. Our goal is to bring that alternate and external data in to infuse that so there can be a broader and better understanding and predictive power. So we do believe that when you have the ability, say, to take a claims data set, which is anonymized, right? And the ability to then bring that back and help the entire industry to better understand it, that's the brilliant part, because those things are usually locked down within those smaller, middle-sized companies. And only the truly large companies tend to feel like they can benefit from it. But that just stifles innovation.
Couldn't agree with you more. And I think that's where liberating and unifying data is so important. And it's one of your passions. So how do you liberate and unify data for use by your customers?
So I get a lot of flack sometimes by saying that we liberate the data, like the data's trapped, right? Not living its fullest life. But I believe that's true. So there's a ton of data. Insurance is by definition a very data-driven industry.
Oh, yeah.
And oftentimes it just lives in systems where people might even charge you to pull it out of that system of record. It can become a real bad business, I think, in that sense that data lives, it can be held against you in many ways, but it's not available to use for its highest and best purpose. Yeah. And so you have to very smartly go about re-architecting. At the very core of it, it's how you architect that data that makes it possible to then unify it with other pieces of data and be able to actually derive value. And for us, we always believe it has to be something actionable, right? It's not just good enough to have a pretty dashboard. We want to know what action to take. Oftentimes that enables managers and leaders of a company to sort of look back and project forward, but we take it more as a predictive AI component, right? That we can personalize down to the individual based on all of those outcomes that we've seen and trained on, and then optimize every single step using with access to great data like that, you can just make better experiences happen.
Based on the conversation I've had with you, but also with some other people over the last few months, I thought I'd share with you, I have my trends for next year that's going to be coming out, my little paper that I always do at the end of every year, kind of think about what's going to be kind of some of the big trends going into the next year. And one of the trends that I identified, Jen, I think you're going to love, it's democratization and demonetization of data accelerates. And I think what it really is about is we've got to break down these barriers and make data more accessible and understandable and actionable to anyone. Kind of hostage, I guess, the data that's trapped inside our systems. That data has to be made available. It's got to be able to have access to that data, to your point about some of the third-party maybe data providers, the cost of that. It really kind of gets into not just innovation, but it's really a competitive and market opportunity, that we can really rethink this to the betterment of ultimately the customers who are buying our insurance products. Because if we have the right data, we can actually price things much better and we can avoid this protection gap that is growing out there in the industry. So that's one of my big trends for next year. And I thought I'd share that with you ahead of time because the conversation we had, but other conversations really got me thinking about that. We've got to demonetize this and we've got to democratize this data to make it easily accessible to people who need it.
You're right. I love that. I think that's a very key aspect. It's in terms of where the industry is headed, it's only going to be fueled by more and more insights and data. It's not going to become less. We're never going to need less data. That's the actuary.
So one of the things we talked about that kind of ties into all of this data conversation was there's different layers or views of using data. You can fill in for when an application comes in and you're underwriting, you can fill in some data. You've got predictive and you've got prescriptive. Talk about those three areas and how Fenris is approaching them in the value to insurers.
This is great. You've got me talking about it. You really should have my data scientists and engineers talking about it, but in a pinch, I can do it for us. So we look at the data and analytics, and we have three lenses. You're right. So it's descriptive at its core, predictive, and then ultimately where you want to get to is prescriptive. So data is really descriptive if it's helping to augment your understanding. So a great example, and our most common use case, is carrier or an agency through their systems will send us the name and address of the applicant. If it's for auto insurance, we will construct a data payload that includes the driver's vehicles, VINs, driver's license, and occasionally even a violations preview. And we'll send that back to them within a second so they can use that descriptive data to pre-fill and validate the applicant for their purposes. And that we do for auto, home, life, and small business. And that's actually what most people know us for, is our pre-fill capabilities. The next level, though, is part of why we built the platform. That data and the alternate data that we use that doesn't get returned, which is very helpful in modeling and lift, that level of data, the predictive data, can predict the action or the outcome. So here, when somebody is beginning to bring a lot of volume into their funnel, take example, like if you're either taking a lot of submissions in and you need to know how to prioritize them, or if you're an auto insurance carrier and you're getting a lot of leads in and you want to increase your conversion rate, but select for the right kinds of risks, right, where you're going to be successful. So our common use case there is we're predicting propensity to buy, lifetime value, when you can cross-sell a bundle, early risk assessments and matching. And we actually do about 3 times as many scores and predictions as we do pre-fill. So Stay tuned. We're getting more and more on that side of things. But the very top level, it requires all of the feedback mechanisms and to be closely allied with our clients through their systems is the prescriptive. So that's just optimizing the outcome at every single step. So like if we review a book and we identify who's most likely to churn, and we're going to prescribe an action to retain that customer or cross-sell them, perhaps not even at renewal, but at the time when we detect that there's a change, we're going to prescribe a certain treatment. That's going to increase the stickiness and value of every insurance policy, every insurance booklet there. So those are kind of the 3 levels that we see. And we were at the core built to be a prescriptive platform, delivering real-time machine learning. The advantage here of using Fenris to augment, if you're going to do this internally, which some clients do, and then they'll carve off a piece, is we're delivering about a 20x ROI to our clients versus doing it internally. Plus, you get the advantage of we've seen tens of millions of outcomes. So our base models start at a place that it might take quite a while for a carrier with their smaller set to get to. and we can just incredibly augment their own predictive capabilities with that.
That's really amazing. 20x. CFOs would be just hunkering for that, in any kind of technology initiative.
Yeah, we think that's a key. You got to have a 10 to 20x return on investment, or it's just a nice to have.
Yeah, exactly. GenAI, the hottest topic in the industry, has been for about the last year and a half, 2 years when GPT came out. Talk about why you think it's such a hot topic, and how do you see the evolution of AI machine models with GenAI going forward, Jen?
Well, you're spot on, Jenna. It's never been hotter. It's an enormous promise for the future. And I think some of the initial use cases that we've seen have been to create like more natural person and machine interactions, right? And digest information. So it's a new generation of chatbots and smart assistants. And it really is kind of miraculous if you can hand a 100-page policy, a document to a machine, and just be able to query it and have it summarize and construct maybe something that's more easily digestible, right? I think that kind of information and assistance is really exciting from GenAI. On our end, we're kind of on the second branch under AI. Instead of GenAI, we're fully focused on the predictive side with machine learning. But here's the thing, when you bring the two together, if you'll allow me, I will bring the old peanut butter and chocolate analogy back.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think there's anything better in this world than, a good old Reese's peanut butter cup.
Exactly.
But when you bring those together, what you've done is, you've taken the generative AI bots. They're just much more effective when they have access to key information. So they can then craft an even better experience, right? And a more streamlined experience to get to the outcome that is optimal. And we think that's kind of the key, the role we play. And some of our partners, we love the exciting things that they're building. We're so glad to be part of it and to help enable their success too in the Gen AI world.
I think that when I look back, AI has been around for decades. We're just now really seeing, I think, the fruits of it really come to everybody's notice. But I think that the most exciting thing is that we've all talked about trying to modernize insurance. We've talked about transforming insurance. And a lot of times we ripped and replaced the technology, just to upgrade the technology, but we didn't really think about how do we really optimize the business. And that's been kind of one of those things that, we'll do that after we implement the technology. And then we never get to it because it's always another thing. And I think with Gen AI, it really has that opportunity to truly optimize the business that can really decrease the overall unit cost, the operating cost. It can really deliver real business value that, coupled with what you're doing, Jen, we could see really significant value back to the business that has been kind of elusive, I think, for the last few decades. So I see that as the real kind of magic between the two.
Honestly, I really think that it's so brilliant when you guys can get to scale, such as you guys are seeing. You're on the cusp of some of the most innovative things at Majesco, being pushed by your customers, but also pushing your customers, right, to get there. I'm in it. I'm just like, let's go, right? Let's go. Let's get this done. Let's allow people to have a little more time to do the higher level thinking, and the things that are really repetitive, right? We can turn that over to something else to summarize for us, and it will learn, and it will get smarter, and it will assist.
And ultimately, it gives better value and better information back to the customers when you're able to do that, and you can handle those things much better. What's next for the industry and for Fenris?
What's not next for the industry? We're at probably the most exciting time in my career, and I thought it was pretty exciting in the early days. But I'm with you, right? I don't want to sleep a wink. I want to see what's happening. Fortunately, we do have kind of a front row seat with a lot of our partners being so innovative, early adopters. But I expect in the next few years, we're going to finally see the fruition, the culmination of all of these AIs. They're going to be very specific use cases, and then they're going to push the envelope even further. Pace of change will be really fast. It is a regulated industry, so there will be missteps and there will be things to learn along the way. For Fenris, I think we'll be producing 100 times the predictions that we are today, thousands. I think we'll be enabling billions in premium. I really think that the best is yet to come. As a startup, it's really important to be early, but not too early. Right? Those are some lessons I learned across my 3 startups. And each time I think we get a little bit better. And I think the industry as a whole is really embracing it, which is unusual. There have been times of change where the insurance industry has been very much against it or very slow. But in this case, based on some of the surveys, I think you guys put out a survey as well, it is imperative and people see it as such. So you've got a real willing level the playing field sort of participation across all levels in this industry. So we're ready, right? We want to see some really ethical treatments. We want to see things be fair, transparent, and understandable. And at the same time, we want to see the industry as a whole just get better and better.
I see this phase of insurtech. We learned a lot in that first phase. And to your point, it was about getting rid of the agents. It was all of that. I see us going back to the core of the business now. And that's where we can really make huge impact. And that's what excites me, because ultimately that's going to be a value to our customers and society.
It's so great, isn't it, to be able to see the volume of conversations, the quality of the conversations. I feel like we're just pushing past the early adopters to almost the fast followers getting on board. Has that ever happened in insurance, right? That we've seen a compression of that innovation curve.
So I always like to end my podcast with the same question. If you could use one word or phrase to describe the future of insurance, what would it be and why?
Exciting, right? We just went over that. I think the excitement is building, and I, for one, am here for it.
I'm all in too. And for those of us that get excited by it, are inspired by it, we've seen a lot through our careers. But this is actually, to your point, one of the most exciting times, I think, for insurance to really make a huge difference with technology, with data, with rethinking the business models and how we're going about assessing risk. It's really, really exciting. And we have to change.
We are ready for it too. I feel like you and I should make a date, like be back here in 5 years and let's talk again about all of the pace of change, because everything that happened in the last 10, I feel it's now compressed. It's almost happening on a yearly basis, the advancements and the change.
You better, Jen. Just look at the pace of change for GenAI in just 2 years. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, it's mind-boggling.
I think ChatGPT launched 2 years and 2 days ago, as of the date of this podcast.
Yeah.
And look at the change. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, as always, Jen, it's been great speaking with you. And I am so glad that we were able to connect as an original one of the startups, as a woman, as a leader, and now as a partner. And we're looking forward to some really great things with you. So thank you so much for your insights.
Oh, thank you, Denise. This has been such a pleasure.
That's it for this week's episode of Future of Insurance Industry Leaders podcast. Subscribe to our market-leading podcast series, available wherever you get your podcast from. Thank you for listening, and be sure to tune in the next time.